Cool, right, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Harry. I'm here to talk about why fast matters. It's quite a long talk. I've had to trim a couple of slides out. These slides that I share at the end will be the full version of the talk, so check those out. Yeah, let's get straight into it. So I'm Harry. I'm a consultant developer from Leeds, which is a city in the north of England. I'm currently focusing a lot on performance. So I know this is CSSConf, but a lot of my work at the moment focuses very strongly on kind of performance engineering, helping clients make their sites faster, more reliable, more resilient. And just real quickly, I want to go on a bit of a tangent. 3 years ago, at a conference in Paris, I met the organizers of CSSConf Budapest. And as soon as I heard the words CSSConf in Budapest, I was like, I need to be there, right? I have to be. And for a few years, it didn't happen. And I finally got the email this year, and I was like, yes, like whatever I need to do, I will be there. I arrived on Saturday. I've been exploring the city. Absolutely beautiful city, incredible city, really great food and drink. The people are really nice. But Monday was a national holiday, right? So museums were closed, everything was closed. So I decided, well, Monday is the day I will spend walking, right? I'll spend that day outside because I can't go to museums. So I took a walk up to the Statue of Liberty. Anyone been up there? Yeah, beautiful. But it wasn't on Monday. It was terrible weather. This is such a bad idea. I can barely keep my eyes open because the rain was coming in sideways. My hair's all over the place. Absolutely dreadful, horrible weather. So, I mean, I'm English, right? So I'm kind of used to it, but still, it wasn't great. But then Sarah landed yesterday, and I was like, Sarah, I need to go back. It's good weather. So I went up again yesterday, and how beautiful is that? Look at that. This was the view I was treated to yesterday afternoon. And what I thought was quite nice was... check that out. Anyway, right, let's get down to it. I've got like 98 slides left. I work for a lot of different clients, right? I'm a consultant. I'm very lucky, very fortunate, very privileged that in the last 4 years, in fact, my company turns 4 years old today, right? I've been working for myself for 4 years starting today, right now. So it's my company's birthday, which is pretty baller. But yeah, I've worked with some beautiful, wonderful clients over the last few years. I've been very, very privileged. One of these clients, the Trainline, sort of center bottom there, Trainline is a European company who sell train tickets. And they released a case study recently, a couple of years ago maybe, which said that if they could reduce latency by just 0.3 seconds, customers would spend around £8.1 million more every year. So I've actually been helping them with this body of work. It's been very fascinating, very insightful. And the good news is it's actually kind of easy to make a site 0.3 seconds faster, right? It's not much time at all. But that 0.3 seconds had a tangible, sort of measurable impact on their baseline, right? £8.1 million a year. Another company, unfortunately not a client of mine, but Netflix saw a 43% decrease in their bandwidth bill simply by turning on gzip. A couple of things here, like, who turned gzip off in the first place? Like, this case study should really say, Netflix used to waste 43% of their bandwidth bill by not having gzip turned on. But the second thing is, 43% is an enormous number. Imagine if you went to a restaurant and for some reason they decided to give you 43% off your bill. It's a huge number. So imagine what that translates to in savings for somebody the size of Netflix. So they saved a huge amount of money here. GQ, kind of lifestyle magazine, they cut load times by a very, very impressive 80%, and in return saw an 80% increase in organic traffic. So not search, not paid for, kind of completely organic traffic. And of that increase, the median time on site went up by 32%. This is a really great case study for when your clients or your managers or whoever tell you that, well, we're not e-commerce, right? We're not e-commerce, so we don't think performance equals money. Well, it may not do, but it will increase engagement. It will keep people more loyal. And as much as I hate to mention it, GQ has ads on their site, right? So this will translate to more money. Eventually, this will make them more cash. Imagine increasing ad impressions by nearly a third, right? So it will ultimately translate to money. I got all of these case studies from WPOstats.com. This is a fantastic resource if you ever struggle to sell performance to your managers, your clients. It's full of really good information, but the reason I picked these 3 specific case studies is because each one tells us something different. The first one, it will make us more money, right? It will make the business more money. The second one, it will save us money, right? Performance will reduce our costs. In fact, I worked for a company recently, and just by optimizing for performance, we reduced their data overheads by 62%. Right? We reduced their transfer by 62% just by focusing on performance. And thirdly, it will just make users happier. We know from our own experience that slow websites are tedious, and we don't use them, we abandon them. But what I want to talk about today in this talk is another side to performance. Because nearly all the time when we discuss performance, we've got a very westernized, kind of very capitalistic view of what it's about. I want to talk about the non-financial side of things. I believe there's a kind of ethical and moral side to performance. There are moral reasons why we should be fast and why we should focus on building fast and performant websites. I've got 3 short anecdotes I want to share with you. Anecdotes aren't great because obviously anecdotes aren't the same as evidence or data, but these are 3 really interesting stories that all happened to me this year. So I'm not talking about the internet 5 or 10 years ago, I'm talking about the internet in 2017. First one, I was organizing an event with a friend of mine. My friend runs a really, really great coffee shop in Leeds, and I sent him an email, and it was an important email, and he just did not reply to me, and I was stressing, right, because I was like, well, we need to decide what's going to happen. So eventually I just went into the coffee shop and just said, look, dude, like, you didn't reply to the email, what's going on? He was like, look, I'm really sorry. I was on holiday in Thailand, and I got a push notification telling me I'd received an email, but the data connection out there was so weak that I couldn't actually open it. I hadn't sent a huge 20 meg attachment. It was just a simple plain text email, but he lacked the data, the connectivity to actually open and read it. The next one, somebody sent me an email, and this happens quite often. Someone sent me an email asking for some advice, just general kind of career advice, and I sent a really long response. And after about 2 weeks, the person still hadn't replied to me, and I was like, well, that's kind of rude, because I did put a lot of effort into the reply, but whatever, I'll get over it. But then a few days after that, like sort of 2-3 weeks later, I get a response. He was like, I'm really sorry for the delayed reply. I've been on a really bad connection. And I was like, well, I will forgive you if you tell me everything you mean by bad connection. And this is what he said. I'm currently at my parents' place in Rajasthan, which is northern India. Since my parents don't have a computer, they only consume internet through their smartphone. We rely on internet services by telco providers, which in our town are still 2G. Some providers claim to be 3G, but I've never seen that happening. Right now I've connected my laptop via Wi-Fi hotspot, and opening the basic version of Gmail takes between 30 and 60 seconds. Most other sites, I just use mobile Chrome because that will make savings for me. So 2 interesting things here. I've used the basic HTML version of Gmail maybe 5-6 times in my entire life. And when I do, I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, right? And it loads and it's fine and it's a bit clunky, but it works. This person has to use it all the time, and it still takes up to a minute to load the basic version of Gmail. The second thing, and more interestingly here, is when you go home, you've probably got a router in the corner of your room that beams out Wi-Fi. And if you're lucky, that Wi-Fi might be backed by a fiber network. And that's how we get online. This guy's family, 100% of the time they're getting online. It's not via Wi-Fi, it's not via broadband, it's not a dedicated connection. They don't have a router in the corner of the room. They've got a commodity Android device, which is beaming out a 2G connection. High latency, low bandwidth device, 100% of the time. Third one that happened to me, I got a DM. Again, somebody asking for advice. I'm not called @Harry on Twitter, so I don't know who got the notification. But this person pinged me asking for some advice, and this is a Nepalese developer. Now, completely as a sort of side kind of coincidence, I'd worked out from my Google Analytics that Nepal was a problem region for my site. My site was slow in Nepal. So I sort of gave this guy some answers, and I said, oh, by the way, whilst I have your attention, does my website feel slow for you? Because my analytics tells me that my website is slow in Nepal. And his response was astounding. He said, no, I don't think so. I mean, I click through to your site and it loads within a minute. And that didn't feel slow. If we were to visit a website that took a minute to load, we'd assume the website was down, right? We'd, oh, the website's down, I'll go somewhere else. This person was like, oh, that's fast, a minute, good work. And the worst thing here, right, the other thing I want to mention is that my site is meant to be fast, right? If you visit my site from Dublin, for example, or from Los Angeles or whatever, it'll be fully rendered within 1.3 seconds. The exact same code base, the exact same CDN, the exact same infrastructure, but visited from Nepal, they pay a penalty of like 58 seconds just to visit my site. Imagine what it's like for this person visiting sites that haven't been optimized. It must be completely tiresome. It must be, in fact, almost impossible. You may have noticed a couple of things about this, though. One of the most important being that all of these stories, all of these things, they happened in the Far East. Has anybody heard of an initiative called the Next Billion Users? Anyone heard of this? Yeah, not many. Okay, so just Google it, right? Because when you Google it, you'll find this resource from Quartz, which is a very good canonical resource all about the next billion internet users. There are roughly, it's actually more than a billion, but 1,253,000,000 is less catchy, I guess. The next billion users coming online are all coming online from emerging economies. And a lot of those emerging economies are in the Far East. You may have seen this graphic before. More people live inside of that highlighted area than outside of it. Even taking into account how much ocean there is under that highlighted area, more people live inside of it than outside of it. When you consider that this contains places like Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, very densely populated areas, it soon starts to make sense. But this is the majority of our next billion users. These are who we need to optimize for. I'm just going to really quickly run through some stats around some of these regions, some of the countries in this region. Bangladesh, average connection of about 3.5 meg. Only 15% of people are online. 3.9 million broadband subscribers represents 2.4% of the population on a dedicated broadband connection, what we would actually call Wi-Fi, or Ethernet, like a broadband dedicated connection. But with 134 million cellular subscriptions, 83% of the population get online via mobile, high latency, low bandwidth. That represents a delta of 34 times more people get online with mobile only than they do with broadband in Bangladesh. India, 3.5 meg, quarter of people online. 1.3% of the population have a dedicated internet connection. But with 1 billion, and that's not a typo, that's a billion with a B, cellular subscriptions, 79% of Indians get online with a high latency, low bandwidth connection. That's 58 times more people. These numbers only get worse. Pakistan, average connection, 2.5 meg. A fifth of people are online. 1.8 million subscribers for broadband represents just 1% of the population with a reliable network. 126 million cellular subscribers represent 67% with an unreliable mobile-only connection. That's 70 times more people. And finally, I think, these were the slides I thought I'd cut out, so this is a surprise to me as well. All this data was meant to be skipped over in this talk. Fastest connection of the group, 4.5 meg, represents a fifth of people online. Just 1.1% of the population have a dedicated connection. But a weird phenomenon here, 132% of the population have a mobile connection. And this represents people with more than one cellular subscription, more than one SIM card. I've got 2 SIM cards. I've got a different travel SIM that's cheaper to use abroad than my British one. So Indonesia, a lot of people will have more than one cellular subscription. And the Far East is the fastest growing economy on the planet, and Indonesia is its fastest growing country. So this may represent how, or why it's got this kind of growth in mobile. But this represents 121 times more people getting online via a solely high latency, low bandwidth connection. If we average the data out, we'll quickly see that 3.5 meg connection, 20% of people are online full stop. So 80% of the population aren't even online yet. These are our next billion users. Only 1.5%, 1.45% of this region actually have broadband, actually have a proper internet connection. Whereas a staggering 90% of that region has a mobile-only device. Let's contrast that. We're looking at nearly 14 meg speeds. 3/4 of people here are online. Over a quarter have dedicated broadband, and actually, again, right here, 119% of people have more than one device. We're contrasting very, very different views. Anytime I do this kind of talk in the West, I tailor kind of this slide to each individual country. We are doing so much better than people in the Far East. So what does this tell us? It tells us a few things. We're building for a totally different class of user, completely different profile of user. It also means that we need to change our technological decisions. When we talk about building mobile first, we normally think, oh, well, I use min-width media queries, right? That's mobile first. Not at all. Mobile first now means don't build by default on a laptop. I have clients who do this all the time. They will build a specific m.dot website, and most of their testing is just resizing Chrome. We need to build testing first and foremost on a high latency, low bandwidth connection. Optimize for the lowest common denominator first, because speed is a feature, right? People don't have access to the same kind of infrastructure we do. When I go through this kind of stuff with clients, the first question I get asked is, how fast should we be? How fast is fast enough? And the bad news is there's no real answer to that question. I can't answer that very quickly. But normally, if it's a very commercial sort of for-profit client, I would normally say just be faster than your nearest competitor, right? It's probably the quickest way to start. Just be faster than the person who you want to be your nearest sort of commercial competitor. There's a really great tool I found almost by accident called DareBoost. DareBoost, French startup, kind of an odd name, especially when I say it in my northern accent. DareBoost doesn't sound very inspiring, but great little tool. You can put your web address in. There's a guy, he runs a little site called CSS Tricks. I don't know if you've heard of him. But I thought, right, well, let's benchmark each other against ourselves. And it turns out I'm a little faster than his site. But then what you have to remember is my site's like a personal blog, whereas Chris's site is a full-on kind of WordPress community. So you do have to kind of take into consideration differences in the actual infrastructure and the site itself. But if you're working with clients who don't know where to start optimizing for performance, start here. This tool is great. Another tool, substantially more expensive, but also very, very good, is SpeedCurve. And these slides are a little low contrast, I'm afraid, but hopefully you can see that we've got like this historical data. We're benchmarking several different sites against one another. These kind of graphs, these charts are absolutely fantastic for proving to non-technical stakeholders of the business, clients, managers, exactly how well we're doing. We don't need to tell our manager that, DNS overhead is down by 3%, or we've reduced the number of requests by 15. No one needs to know about that. No one cares about that, right? We can show them things like this. Cool, so how do we get there? And this is the probably most important bit. The first kind of part of this talk was kind of a call to arms, I guess, and just kind of laying the scene, setting the scene for how bad it is using the internet in different parts of the world. This next part of the talk is going to be some sort of fundamental advice and strategies on how to get there. I've got 3 kind of tips, and they're not like a BuzzFeed style, like you would not believe these 3 simple things. Because they're not, and actually there aren't even 3 of them, there are 4. But yeah, these are going to be fairly fundamental shifts. They're not going to be necessarily easy, but they're probably the biggest fundamental changes you can make to workflows and company culture to actually start building fast websites and properly servicing people who don't have the same infrastructure as we do. The reason I said 3 tips when I meant 4 is because the first one is actually like a throwaway kind of 0 tip. Because honestly, the 0th step in optimizing for performance is just build a fast website. Just go and do it. No one's going to stop you. Now, this sounds very tongue-in-cheek. This sounds very like a pointless thing to say, but genuinely, this is where I start with all of my clients. If you want a fast website, then make sure you've said that you want a fast website. It's not going to happen by accident. It's not easy to make a fast website. So you need to make sure that it's actually a goal. You need to make sure it's something that you, the team, marketing, design, stakeholders, everyone needs to focus on this goal. So although it sounds like a really silly throwaway comment, this is probably the most important thing you and your team can do, is actually decide between yourselves and officially that you want to have a fast website. And you'll be surprised how much easier it gets. Okay, let's start with the proper stuff. Step 1, understand the problem, but like really properly understand it. Try your site from a different kind of point of view. Being fast or having a fast website from your office in a nice European capital city with blazing fast sort of fiber connections, being fast in that environment isn't fast. That's not really fast. If you can be fast in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere on a 2G connection, then you're going to be fast everywhere. If you optimize for the worst possible scenario, everything else on top of that is completely free. If you start by doing the hardest bit, then everything on top of that is already solved. And it can't get much simpler. If you optimize for what your perceived worst case scenario is, everything else on top of it is already solved. Facebook did this quite well. They introduced something called 2G Tuesdays. This is where once a week, on a Tuesday, oddly enough, they artificially throttled the speed of their connection to Facebook's products to a 2G connection. So anybody working in the Facebook offices, any Facebook staff visiting their products and services on a Tuesday would be forced over a 2G-like connection. So obviously it didn't affect regular visitors, but IP ring fencing, they basically said any staff visiting the site on a Tuesday are going to be forced through a 2G connection to understand what it really feels like to use our applications in emerging economies. And they soon realized that we've not done a very good job here. And it gave them a real sense of empathy, a quick dose of like an awakening. And they started to optimize and they started to fix these things. Now, I personally, as in specifically me, I lack the skills to actually set up this kind of infrastructure where we can IP ring fence. But what I can do and what I do with clients is use a tool called Charles Proxy. Anybody heard of Charles? Yeah, quite a few of us. So Charles Proxy it's a proxy, it's a network proxy. But my favorite feature of Charles is the throttling. And you can throttle specific endpoints. So what you can do is you can slow your entire machine's traffic down, but only to certain websites, hosts. So this means that, Charles is free, by the way. There's like a $50 paid for option, but it's free. What this means is that I will say to my clients, okay, all the developers go and install Charles and slow down just our website. It means you can listen to Spotify just fine. It means you can do email, you can do what you need to do, you can get to Stack Overflow nice and quickly, but just our website, let's slow that down, and let's see how it feels. And the frustration that the developers who built the website themselves, the frustration they feel is usually enough of a motivation to start fixing things. But there's kind of some bad news. It's not just about connection speed anymore. So we talk a lot about, the internet's very slow out here, or there's high latency. Solving connection is only half of the battle. Like solving the performance over the wire is only a very small fraction of what we need to do. Who's got a phone like this in their pocket? This is an iPhone 7. Anyone got an iPhone 7? Anyone got like a fairly new Android device? Yeah, I expected that. Like most of us have got pretty decent phones, right? We're in tech, we tend to update phones fairly frequently. And that's good for us, lucky us. We've got nice powerful devices. Unfortunately, this isn't very representative. Current advice coming from Google's performance engineering team is that the most representative worldwide phone is the Moto G4, right? Across a global spectrum, the Moto G4 is probably the one phone that they say is the best to optimize for. It's the most representative on a global scale. Some really quick sort of comparisons show us that an iPhone 7 is roughly twice as fast in terms of processing power than the Moto G4. You immediately get a double performance benefit just by owning a certain phone. More forensic benchmarking shows us that in nearly every single test, the iPhone 7 is 3 to 4 times more capable than a Moto G4. So imagine when you visit a site on your iPhone and they've got ads everywhere and there's loads of position fixed stuff and it's like scrolling through treacle. Imagine making that 3 to 4 times slower, right? And that's what people are going to be experiencing. You can start experimenting with this. I mean, I'm fairly certain everyone's seen this by now, but in Chrome, we've got these throttling features. The network one on the top is all right. So who's used the network throttling in Chrome before? Good. Wow, amazing. Good. It's a great start, but the problem with the network throttling in Chrome is it only affects the application layer. It's very, very, very synthetic. Charles, which is free, does this kind of throttling, but on the network layer. So it'll actually do traffic shaping. It'll simulate packet loss, for example. So this is a great start, but when you install Charles, you will get the network throttling, which is way more kind of realistic. But underneath it, we can see CPU slowdown. These have actually been aliased to kind of like mid-range device and high-end device in DevTools. But aim for a 5 times slowdown, and you're going to get a fairly decent representation. But that said, there is no replacement for real devices. The Moto G4 is about 150, 180 euro, I think. Go and speak to someone at the company who's got the company credit card and add one of these Moto G4s to your device lab. This is your performance testing device. I'm a bit of a hypocrite though. I don't actually have a Moto G4. I've got a Nexus 5, which is actually even worse. This is from about 4 or 5 years ago. The Nexus 5 is even slower than a Moto G4, so I do most of my performance testing on this. This is a screenshot from an audit that I sent to a client. So this wasn't actually meant to end up in any slides. This was from a report that I sent to a client. They just finished building an M.dot website. It was literally only for mobile devices. And they built it as a full, JavaScript client-rendered application. And they asked me, hey, how do we make this thing faster? Don't build it as a fully client-rendered JavaScript application. But it was too late by that point. And what we found out is that they were testing, every developer, every engineer had a really nice new MacBook, right? And they were all on a wired connection in central London. The site felt really nice and fast. I plugged in my Nexus 5, I visited their M.dot website, and it took 1.8 seconds just to evaluate their main app.js. Trainline, a client that I mentioned at the beginning, 0.3 seconds is worth 8 mil to them, and we're throwing 1.8 seconds away just evaluating a JavaScript file. So processing speed has a marked impact on performance, and the problem is here, this is all divorced from network speeds. If I had my Nexus 5 talking to the server over a fiber connection, it would still take 1.8 seconds, right? Because this is all happening on the device. So this is what I mean when I say that connection speed's only a small fraction of the battle anymore. So yeah, build up an idea of realistic conditions. Realistic devices, realistic kind of topography, as in what is the network looking like in certain parts of the world. And processing power, right? These are the things we need to get a really good handle on because testing from the devices that we build on is not suitable anymore. Step 2, know what's going on. I told you these weren't simple tips, right? It would have been so nice if I was like, oh, install this and do this and this plugin and make your site faster. This is another really difficult one. Know what's going on. I find myself all the time, especially when I work with new clients, like, what does this script do? Like, what even is this? I've never seen this before. Who's in charge of this? Who installed this? What's going on? Who lives this? Whose life is this slide, right? Only us two, man. Like, I get this all the time. I will build a site or I'll work on a site and I'll put it live and I'll look at the live version and I'll be like, whoa, I did not do that. Where has this come from? What are these tracking pixels? I didn't install any of these tracking pixels. So what ends up happening is other people are contributing. We'll get onto it in a second, but tag managers, for example. Other people are contributing to your kind of code base all the time, circumventing the dev process. So you end up just having no idea what any of the files are on the live product. So other people, teams, can add things to the site quite easily. Not every site. I'm mainly talking like anything e-commerce. Tag managers, social widgets, tracking scripts, retargeting, ads, all of that kind of crap. In fact, ironically, things like A/B testing tools that work on the client or optimizing tools, right? These optimizing tools have this horrible effect of actually, by measuring the site's performance, we're going to end up making it slower, right? Which is the painful irony. So yeah, if you're in this situation, call meetings, try and find out what things are, find out who's using it, find out if they even need it. I've had it so many times when I go into a client and I say, oh, I notice you're using this analytics package and this analytics package on the same page. Why is that? It's like, oh, we were supposed to uninstall the other one. How long's that been there? It's like, I don't know. It's your website. You tell me. And it turns out that people, like, we haven't logged into this analytics package for like 2 years, but it's been on the site the whole time. So this is kind of our responsibility to kind of audit and sort of work back from this. Let's talk briefly about tag managers. Honest show of hands, who isn't sure what a tag manager is? A few of us. So imagine the scenario, right? You're a developer and somebody says to you, hey, can you just install this little analytics snippet? And you're like, I'm kind of busy, but I'll try and do it after lunch. So you quickly do that and you sneak that bit of work in and it goes live. And the next day they say, hey, cheers, that was really great, thank you. Could you just install this bit as well? And it's like, you can't keep doing this. Like, I've actually got proper work to do. Like, can you please prioritize it? And marketing get annoyed because it's like, oh, the developers won't do what I ask them. And you're, well, I've got work to do already. So somebody invented something called a tag manager. which is where the developer gets asked to install just one JavaScript file. Like, can you just put this one JavaScript snippet on the site? And this tag manager is like a conduit to like an admin panel, Google Tag Manager, Adobe Tag Manager, which is basically a WYSIWYG, where marketing departments can install their own analytics. They can install their own tracking scripts. And they're writing production JavaScript. It's not production quality JavaScript, oh no, but it is going to production, right? They can arbitrarily say, let me A/B test this button. Let me track clicks on this link. Let me see how many times the carousel manages to go through. And what ends up happening is you've got people who are non-developers completely skipping the dev process and putting JavaScript on your live site. That's why when you look at the live site and it looks very, very different to what you actually built, this is what happens. It's because there are other people able to just add things into production without consulting a developer even once. So, in the green box, we have the website, right? This is a company I was working with recently. The green box represents the website. This is what the user turned up to see. The red box is tracking scripts, it's analytics, it's retargeting, it's adverts, it's just bullshit. It's disrespect is what that is. Because a user didn't want to see any of that. A user did not want to see, and if you're on a data plan where you're paying for the data as you use it, right? You know, you're on a travel sim here in Budapest, right? And you've got several euro of data on your phone, you're paying for all this red. So we call it targeting or retargeting, we call it analytics, but it's kind of just disrespectful, right? To force this upon users who don't want it. So that's what tag managers are. If you're running tag managers on your site, or if you don't know if you are, or if you want to know more about it, speak to your marketing team and just ask them, are we doing anything like this to our users? So yeah, know your liabilities. For years we called them assets, but they're not, they're liabilities, right? They've got a chance to take us offline. So, third parties can and will cripple our performance. A client of mine used a client-side A/B testing tool. Client-side A/B testing is the devil, by the way, don't do it. And what it was doing is it was contributing 98% of the runtime overhead to their page. 98% of the runtime overhead was ironically caused by a tool meant to optimize the site. If you want to find out this kind of stuff, in DevTools, you want to go to Performance, run a profile, bottom up, and then group by domain, and it will literally list which domains, which third parties are causing you the worst performance problems at runtime. So this client, we re-platformed the entire site, we rebuilt the whole thing, and one of our first things, me and the CTO, we decided, let's take all the kind of third-party stuff out and see how things go. So we did, we ripped out all the stuff, put the site live, and because it was a complete rebuild, like the site didn't look, sorry, it was a re-platforming, not a redesign, the site didn't look any different for the users. So we didn't do email campaigns, we didn't tweet about it because there was nothing new for the users to really see. So what we found out is that purely organic traffic, 2 weeks after the rebuild, the kind of conversions were up, revenue was up, items added to cart, that had increased. Time on site had gone down, because if you're an e-commerce company and you look for a high time on site, you're doing it wrong. If you owned a real life shop and someone spent 2 hours in your shop and left with 1 bottle of water, you've messed up, right? So in an e-commerce build, time on site needs to be low because we don't want to trap people there too long. Let them turn up, buy stuff, disappear. So what ended up happening is the site was really fast and all metrics were up. And the marketing team were really impressed. And we were glad because we were quite proud of our work. And the marketing team said, can we put an A/B testing tool on here to make it even better? And me and the CTO were like, no, the only reason it's good now is because we got rid of all that crap. Like, please don't do that. And they dug their heels in and they said, look, we want this tool. We need to put it on the site. So what ended up happening is first paint went from 0.8 seconds up to 2.1, is that? Yeah, 2.1. The A/B testing tool made the site over twice as slow. Right? It more than doubled the time to first render. The site got twice as slow because of, ironically, adding a tool that was meant to optimize it. Absolutely heartbreaking. We couldn't really win this fight. As soon as you have to do this kind of stuff, you're on the back foot. But beware of the tools you're using. I need to speed up. Identifying third parties then. So this is, if you've got Chrome with DevTools experiments enabled, you can find a little thing called network request groups. Nice catchy title. And what that will allow you to do is group different things coming from third parties. You can also turn on a product column. Hopefully you can, Chrome changes so often that sometimes this is there, sometimes it isn't. But the product column will literally start listing which third parties your site is requesting. So here's the BBC, and we noticed some oddities. We turned the product column on. Hopefully you can see we've got things from Campaign Monitor, things from DoubleClick. This really starts to demystify where all this stuff is coming from, right? But also we had a problem here with a certain third party had a 35-second TCP connection, right? And that was directly linked to the load event. So the load event was stalled for 35 seconds, which means any other important things that happen on the load event were delayed by half a minute. And we traced it back to this thing, Rubicon project. So identifying third parties has become a lot easier in DevTools now by using stuff like this. So yeah, being vulnerable. Third parties can and will take us offline. I mentioned tag managers. They're bad for their own reasons. There's a specific tag manager. It's Adobe Tag Manager, but it's not specific to Adobe. A lot of other third parties do this. But if your third-party ad code or whatever isn't asynchronously loadable, and that third party has an outage, it can take you offline for 1.3 minutes. That's Chrome's built-in timeout. So if this retargeting sort of like ad code kind of tag manager goes offline, we go offline for 1.3 minutes. It's a complete white screen. That's a complete nothingness for the user for 80 seconds. If you want to work out how to do this or you want to audit this yourself, stick these IP addresses or this IP address in your hosts file. Basically, it's a publicly available black hole server. Any traffic that goes to any of these endpoints will actually get routed through a server where it simulates a full outage. Again, the slides are online, so don't worry. So yeah, don't prioritize your own metrics over your users' experiences. There's no point having a site where you can measure really accurate data, but then none of the users can actually access the site. So it's a very fine balancing act. And finally, I'm going to have to really speed up. Measure everything. Measuring everything tells us two important things. One, how do I know what's wrong? And two, how do I know when I fixed it? Most times when I'm asked to make a company's website faster, they'll just say, can you make the homepage faster? And it's like, well, okay, but how do you know the homepage is a problem? Maybe it's a more important page further in. In the sort of search engine forward world, the homepage is very rarely an entry point anyway. You probably land on a different page entirely. So analytics. Who's got Google Analytics on their site? Okay, who hasn't logged into it for like 6 months? Yeah, I think a lot of you are lying. Analytics has got some really great information in here. You can begin exploring things geographically. This is a really huge GIF, and it will beach ball my machine for a few seconds because it's a bit too large. But log into analytics. Behavior, site speed, page timings will start to give you an overview of how your page is performed on certain days, and you can cross-reference that with specific URLs, specific geographical locales. So this is how I learned about Nepal being a problem area for me. And you can cross-reference, okay, visitors from this country to these pages have a really bad time. What's different about this page than it is about this other page that's usually quite fast? And you can start to identify what the problem might be. I've done this with clients before, and it's been really, really valuable. Worked with a tourism company who thought they needed to optimize for the UK. It turns out their other biggest market was Australia, and they were the kind of most sort of like ill-served geographical locale. And you can cross-reference that with, yeah, like I say, specific page for specific countries. Brazil here, turns out Brazil's a real problem area for me. So all of the emerging economies we've talked about so far are in the East. But it turns out Brazil is also classed as an emerging market. In order to purchase 500 megabytes of data in Brazil, you would have to work for 8.6 hours on minimum wage. That's basically a full day's work on minimum wage just to purchase 500 megabytes of data. I did a little comparison. I mentioned I've got a specific travel sim, which I use maybe 20% of the time. So at 20% usage over 18 months, I racked up nearly 15 gig of data usage. Now, for a Brazilian person working minimum wage on a post-paid data plan to purchase 15 gig, they would have to work 28 days. That's basically an entire month of your year spent working just for your data plan. So when we send all that stuff over with tracking codes, with tag managers, we are literally costing people tangible amounts of money. Speed curve, right? So I mentioned measuring the before. Measuring the before told me that I had a problem in Brazil. So what I did is I thought, well, if the before tells me that Brazil's bad, I'm going to implement a fix, and I'm going to measure the after. So speed curve allows you to geographically test your site from different parts of the globe. So Brazil, I set up some monitoring from there, and I just pulled my site, like tested it every day for 3 months, I think this screenshot says. And you can quite clearly see here that the fix I implemented had benefit. Now this is important because we could just fix things blindly and hope it worked. And we don't really know, we can't prove that it worked unless we're measuring absolutely everything. So, duplicate slide. Here we can see that something happened, something incredible happened on this day. This is fantastic to take to clients, managers, the business, whoever it is. You don't need to be technical to understand that something very, very good happened on this day. So this is the sort of major benefit of the before and after, is because you can start making more business cases. Say to your manager, hey, look, you gave me 3 days to fix a performance issue, and I can show you measurably the benefit that that had. And you can use that to set up budgets, so performance budgets. People in management don't like the word budget, so it's just kind of like monitoring with alerts. I set my site up. My site's fairly typical, but I use myself as an example because I need to build fast websites if I'm going to convince clients to pay me money for it. So I've got my site set up on SpeedCurve also, and it's like there's not much going on. It's a fairly typical website. You'll find that, I mentioned this earlier, in Ireland, you visit my site, it will be fully rendered in 1.28 seconds, right? Every single day I'm under my allowed budget. I don't know if you can see, but there's a really faint red line running across like here. Every single day in Ireland, I'm under budget, so I'm doing really well. It's like I'm showing off to a room full of people. I'm doing really well. Fully loaded, again, I'm under budget every single day. Just by moving over to Brazil, the exact same code base, the exact same CDN, the exact same infrastructure, just by visiting from Brazil, I'm immediately paying a penalty. About 50% of the time, I go over budget. And that's not because I've built the site badly, it's because literally being from Brazil, you have to pay this geographic penalty where the internet is not as good for you. Again, similar story with the fully loaded event, it still goes over budget. Now, this isn't even bad. This isn't even bad. What I did is, in SpeedCurve, you can set up specific profiles. So I created a profile called Very Bad Network, which is a truly terrible network condition. We get 10% packet loss. We introduce half a second of latency. We only get a down speed of 150 kilobytes a second. And this is what a real sort of 2G connection feels like. This is what it would really feel like to be that guy's family in India visiting websites over their like Android phone in the corner. You can barely see it, but there's my line for my budget, right? This is what I've got to play with. And you can see that every single day, I'm at least doubling my budget. I'm going way over. The other thing you'll notice is there is almost zero consistency. Hopefully you can see this a little better. This is like Brazil, Ireland, San Francisco kind of speeds. As soon as we move to this very bad network, this 2G device out in the middle of a field, there is no consistency. You cannot plan around this. It's very volatile. And it wasn't until I measured it that I realized that, because I could look at these 3 lines and think, yeah, I'm doing a pretty good job. It wasn't until I measured it that I realized how much work there is left to do. So apologies, I've gone over. But in closing, care. Like just want to do it. Just want to build a fast website. It's the easiest way to start is actually care about doing it. Understand as much as you can network users, their devices, their capabilities, and then measure absolutely everything. Statistics and data, you can cross-check them. It's all true. It's all factual. I just want to say thank you for entertaining me for 43 minutes. Thank you very much for listening.